How did Jesus' resurrection fulfill God's promise in the Scriptures? In Luke 24, Jesus tells the disciples on the road to Emmaus that his death and resurrection had all been set forth in Moses and the prophets. But what does this mean? From the beginning of Israel's history, the call of Abraham was set to rectify the problem of death. God had made the world as a place in which he would dwell, and he gave that world over to the human family, the image of God. But in acting contrary to God's will, man was cut off from the tree of life and sent eastwards into exile. When God promises to bless the nations of the world through Abraham and his seed, he calls Abraham to begin journeying westwards from Mesopotamia to Canaan, symbolically returning from the land of man's exile and death to the land of the living. Yet Abraham and his seed are still ultimately subject to death. How can man come into the world as his inheritance if every human being will ultimately be cut off from the world of which he is the heir? This is one of the ways the Scriptures mysteriously connect the theme of exile to the theme of death. Exile is separation from the land to which one belongs. Adam was created to be placed in the Garden of Eden, in the midst of God's presence, free to share in the tree which sustained him in the life with which God had created him. Moses and the prophets bear witness of Jesus' resurrection in the language of exile and restoration. As the Torah comes to its conclusion, it therefore returns to the themes with which it began. In Genesis 3, man is cut off from the tree of life and sent into exile. And in Deuteronomy 30, Moses enjoins the people of Israel to choose life rather than death, good rather than evil. But he does not merely command them. He prophesies concerning Israel's destiny. Because of her sins, Israel will go into exile, but she will return. And when she returns, God will change Israel's inner nature, circumcising Israel's heart, so that it might truly love God in obedience and have life. The prophets develop the words of Moses and point towards their fulfillment in the coming of the Messiah. Isaiah 49:3 calls the servant of the Lord Israel. Yet Isaiah 49:5 says that the servant of the Lord will gather Israel back to God. This is because the servant of the Lord described in Isaiah is the Messiah. The Messiah, the son of David, represents the whole nation and is called by its name, as David represents Israel, carrying her destiny on his shoulders. We know that the servant is the Messiah because Isaiah 55:3 tells us the servant's work fulfills God's everlasting covenant with David to set his son forever on the throne, which is who the Messiah refers to. But how? How does this work? The servant, being named by the name Israel, represents the whole nation, which in turn had been called to bless the world. It was this servant who was crushed for our iniquities and cut off from the land of the living. At our creation, we were placed in the land of the living, but were sent eastwards into exile. God symbolically drew Abraham westwards, promising him that all nations would be blessed in his seed. And here, the servant of the Lord, the son of David, who embodies the destiny and mission of Abraham's seed, is himself, though having done no wrong, cut off in exile from the land of the living. But Isaiah 53:10 reveals the redemption which follows. Though being cut off from the land of the living, he prolongs his days. His life continues, he prospers, and the next chapter reveals the wonder of the gospel. Because of the servant, we are all his heirs. We are all raised up from the grave with him, returning to the land of the living. The inheritance promised to Abraham extends to the whole world, and all of this wonder happened through Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified on the authority of the Roman state, but 3 centuries later was kissed by the emperor of the Romans, who cast away the idols they had worshipped for 1,000 years. All nations are blessed in the seed of Abraham, the crucified and risen Jesus of Nazareth, the Messiah of Israel.